Welcome to Back on the Stack, a cEDH channel. We are once again bringing you an episode of cEDH gameplay. We hope you, the viewers, are seeing a continued improvement in sound, lighting, and overall production as we continue to strive to make high-quality cEDH videos. Let's get right into it and see what decks are being piloted tonight. Going first, we have Eli piloting Raffine, Scheming Seer. For his opening hand, he kept Command Tower, Orcish Bowmasters, Kraum Mox, Force of Negation, Ancient Tomb, Unmarked Grave, and Animate Dead. Second, we have Raij piloting Xolatoyac, the Smiling Flood. For his opening hand, he kept Mindbreak Trap, Mystic Sanctuary, Thrasios, Gilded Drake, Elvish Mystic, Delighted Halfling, and Gemstone Caverns. Thirdly, we have Levi piloting the partner pair of Rock Kraum. For his opening hand, he kept two basic islands, Pact of Negation, Step Through, Mox Diamond, Grim Monolith, and Prismatic Vista. Finally, we have J-Rock piloting Rocco. For his opening hand, he kept Soul Ring, Ancient Tomb, Bountiful Promenade, Eternal Witness, Exotic Orchard, Nature's Claim, and his one London mulligan was a Felidar Guardian. With introductions out of the way, Eli will kick us off. But first, Raij has a pregame action and puts Gemstone Caverns on the battlefield with a luck counter, exiling an Elvish Mystic. Eli draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts a Kraum Mox. It ETBs and he imprints a Force of Negation. He casts an Unmarked Grave. It resolves and Eli tutors Hoarding Broodlord into his graveyard. Eli passes the turn. Raij draws and plays a tapped Mystic Sanctuary for turn. He casts a Delighted Halfling. He passes the turn. Levi draws and plays a Prismatic Vista for turn. He taps it, pays 1 life, sacks it, and tutors up a basic mountain onto the battlefield. He casts a Mox Diamond. It ETBs and he discards a basic island. Levi passes the turn. J-Rock draws and plays Exotic Orchard for turn. He casts Soul Ring. He passes the turn. Eli draws and plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He taps it, loses 2 life, and casts Animate Dead, targeting Hoarding Broodlord in his grave. Broodlord ETBs and Eli searches his library for a card and places it face down in exile. He then taps Hoarding Broodlord to help convoke the face down card, casting Saw in Half, targeting Broodlord. It resolves, Broodlord is destroyed, and Eli creates 2 token copies of Hoarding Broodlord. With each ETB, Eli searches his library for a card and places it face down in exile. Eli then taps one of the tokens to help convoke a Sacrifice, targeting the tapped Broodlord. He adds 8 floating black to his mana pool. He then uses 6 of the floating black and taps the other token to help convoke Peer into the Abyss. In response, Raij casts Mindbreak Trap for its alternative casting cost, targeting Peer. It resolves and Peer is exiled. Eli uses his last 2 floating black mana and casts an Orcish Bowmasters. It ETBs, Eli amasses an Orc army and pings Raij in the face for 1, purely out of spite. He then passes the turn. Raij draws and plays a basic island. He casts Thrasios, Triton Hero. He attempts to pass, but in response, Levi Wizard cycles Step Through and tutors up a Magus of the Moon into his hand. The turn then moves to Levi. Levi draws and plays a basic island. He casts Magus of the Moon. The table groans and Levi passes the turn. J-Rock draws and plays a basic Plains. He passes the turn. Eli draws and plays Reflecting Pool. He taps all of his mountains, pays 2 life, and casts Phyrexian Metamorph. It ETBs and Eli has it become a copy of Hoarding Broodlord. The new Broodlord ETBs and Eli searches his library for a card and places it face down in exile again. He then taps 3 of his creatures to help convoke the face down card, casting a Grim Hireling. It ETBs and Eli moves to combat. He swings the Broodlord token at Levi and he takes it. Grim Hireling triggers and Eli creates 2 treasure tokens. He passes the turn. Raij draws and plays a Trenzaloric Clock Tower. He casts a Gilded Drake. It ETBs and he exchanges control of it with Eli's Grim Hireling. Raij moves to combat and swings Thrasios at J-Rock. He declares no blocks and takes 1 damage. Grim Hireling triggers and Raij creates 2 treasure tokens. He passes the turn. Levi draws and then dashes in a Ragavan. He swings at J-Rock, J-Rock takes it, Levi creates a treasure token, and then J-Rock exiles a Spire Garden from the top of his library. Levi moves to his end step and Ragavan returns to his hand. The turn moves to J-Rock. J-Rock draws and plays a Bountiful Promenade for turn. He passes the turn. Eli draws and casts Timna the Weaver. He moves immediately into combat, declaring Bowmasters at J-Rock for 1, Gilded Drake at Levi for 3, and both Hoarding Broodlords at Raij for 11. The table declares no blocks. In his second main phase, Tymna triggers and Eli loses 3 life and draws 3 cards. He plays a Scrub land for turn and attempts to move to his end step, but in response, Raij puts a Thrasios activation on the stack. He reveals an Ancient Tomb into play tapped. The turn moves to Raij. Raij draws and goes directly into combat. He declares Grim Hireling at J-Rock and Thrasios at Levi. J-Rock takes 3 and Levi blocks Thrasios with Magus. Grim Hireling triggers and Raij creates 2 treasure tokens. In his second main phase, Raij casts his commander, Xolatoyac, the Smiling Flood. It ETBs, and Raij places a flood counter on his Trenzalore clock tower. It's important to note here that the timestamp of the flood counter going on a non-basic land with a Blood Moon effect already in play turns the land into an island on top of being a mountain. Raij moves to his end step, and Xolatoyac triggers, untapping all of his permanents with counters. The turn moves to Levi. Levi draws and casts a Grim Monolith. He casts his commander, Kraum. He passes the turn. J-Rock draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He passes. Eli draws and goes directly into combat. He declares Bowmasters at J-Rock for 1, the Hoarding Brewlord token at Levi for 4, and both the copies of Hoarding Broodlord and the Gilded Drake for 10 at Raij. Before damage, Raij activates Thrasios and reveals a Tangle Wire into hand. Bowmaster triggers and Eli pings Raij in the face for 1. The table declares no blocks, and in his second main phase, Eli loses 3 and draws 3 through Tymna's ability. Eli plays a City of Brass and passes the turn. Raij draws and plays a Gaia's Cradle. He moves to combat and swings Grim Hireling at J-Rock and Xolatoyac at Eli. On attack, Xolatoyac triggers and Raij puts a flood counter on Gaia's Cradle. J-Rock takes the 3 damage and Eli chump blocks with his Orc army. Grim Hireling triggers and Raij creates 2 treasure tokens. He transmutes a Muddle of the Mixture. He tutors up a Stasis into hand. He casts Stasis. In response, Eli casts an Offer You Can't Refuse, targeting Stasis. In response to that, Raij casts a Swan Song, targeting Offer. Kraum triggers and Levi draws. Bowmaster triggers, Eli amasses 1 Orc and pings Raij in the face for 1. Swan Song counters Offer, Eli creates a 2/2 bird, and through the tears of his opponents, Raij's Stasis resolves. Adding insult to injury, Raij casts Tangle Wire. Raij moves to his end step, and Xolatoyac triggers, untapping all of his permanents with counters. The turn moves to Levi. In Levi's upkeep, Tangle Wire triggers, and Levi taps down 4 permanents. He draws and passes. However, in response, J-Rock casts Enlightened Tutor. He tutors up a Talisman of Unity to the top of his library. The turn moves to J-Rock. In J-Rock's upkeep, Tangle Wire triggers. J-Rock taps down 4 permanents. He draws and passes the turn. In Eli's upkeep, Tangle Wire triggers and Eli taps down 4 permanents. He draws and moves directly to combat. He swings his Orc army at J-Rock, Tymna at Levi, and the Bird token at Raij. They all take it. Eli gains 2 life through Tymna. In his second main phase, Eli loses 3 life and draws 3 cards through Tymna. He plays a Gemstone Caverns for turn. He moves to clean up and passes the turn. In Raij's upkeep, he pays to keep Stasis. Tangle Wire triggers and he removes a Fading counter and then taps down 3 permanents. He draws for turn and moves to combat. He swings Thrasios at Eli for 1. Hireling triggers and Raij creates 2 treasures. He casts Scavenging Ooze. Raij moves to his end step and Xolatoyac triggers, untapping all of his permanents with counters. The turn moves to Levi. Levi skips his untap step due to Stasis. He draws, moves to cleanup, and passes. J-Rock skips his untap step due to Stasis. He draws and passes the turn. Eli skips his untap step due to Stasis. He draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He attempts to pass, but in response, Raij cracks his treasure for green to activate Scavenging Ooze, exiling Eli's Hoarding Broodlord from his graveyard. Raij puts a 1/1 counter on the Skoos, gains 1 life, and then the turn moves to Raij. In Raij's upkeep, he pays to keep Stasis. Tangle Wire triggers and he removes a Fading counter and then taps down 2 permanents. He draws for turn and moves directly to combat. He swings Skoos at Eli. Eli takes 3 and Grim Hireling triggers, giving Raij 2 treasure tokens. In his second main phase, he casts Priest of Titania. Raij moves to his end step, Xolatoyac triggers, untapping all of his permanents with counters. The turn moves to Levi. Levi skips his untap step due to Stasis. He draws, moves to cleanup, and passes. J-Rock also skips his untap step due to Stasis. He draws, plays the Wooded Foothills, and passes. Eli also skips his untap step. He draws, moves to cleanup, and passes. In Raij's upkeep, he again pays to keep Stasis around. Tangle Wire triggers and he removes a fading counter and then taps down 1 permanent. He draws for turn and moves directly to combat. He swings Scoos at Eli for 3, Grim Hireling triggers, and Raij creates 2 treasures. Raij moves to his end step, and Xolatoyac triggers, untapping all of his permanents with counters. The turn moves to Levi. Levi skips his untap step, draws, moves to cleanup, and sadly passes. J-Rock skips his untap step. He draws and finds what could possibly be an answer. The table agrees that Raij needs to be eliminated in order for anyone else to even play Magic. So, J-Rock casts Mana Crypt. He casts Talisman of Unity. Kraum triggers and Levi draws. Bowmaster triggers and Eli pings Levi in the face for 1. J-Rock casts Nature's Claim at sorcery speed, targeting the Stasis, in hopes that Eli can finally untap and swing at lethal for Raij. It resolves and Raij gains 4 life. The turn moves to Eli. Eli untaps and then taps down a land for Tangle Wire. He draws and moves to combat. He swings 2 damage at J-Rock, 1 at Levi, and 16 at Raij. No blocks are declared and Eli gains 2 life through Tymna. In his second main phase, Eli loses 3 and draws 3 through Tymna. Eli then casts an overloaded Cyclonic Rift. In response, Raij activates Scoos and exiles Eli's Fairy Mastermind from his graveyard. Raij gains 1 life and puts a counter on Scoos. He also activates Thrasios. He reveals and draws a Spark Double into hand. Bowmaster's triggers, and Eli pings Raij in the face for 1. Then Psych Rift resolves, Eli moves to cleanup and passes the turn. Raij draws and plays a Cavern of Souls, naming Serpent. He casts his commander again, an uncounterable Xolatoyac. It ETBs and he puts a flood counter on Cavern of Souls. He recasts Scavenging Ooze. Raij moves to his end step, Xolatoyac triggers, untapping all of his permanents with counters. The turn moves to Levi. Levi draws and plays a basic island. He casts Grim Monolith. He casts Dockside Extortionist. It ETBs and he creates 2 treasures. He casts Thada Adel, Acquisitor. In response, Eli taps his Marsh Flats, loses a life, sacks it, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. Levi then moves to his cleanup step and passes the turn. J-Rock draws and casts Mana Crypt. He casts his commander, Rocco, where X equals 1. He tutors up a Wiredwood symbiote onto the battlefield. He casts Soul Ring. He casts Talisman of Unity. He taps his Wooded Foothills, pays a life, sacks it, and fetches up a Taiga onto the battlefield. J-Rock passes the turn. Eli draws and immediately casts Silence. It resolves, locking his opponents out from casting any spells this turn. He casts his commander, Raffine. He taps his Ancient Tomb, takes 2 life, and casts an Agatha's Soul Cauldron. He moves to combat and declares 6 attackers. Raffine triggers and Eli connives 6 times, targeting Tymna with each one. He connives Dauntless Dismantler, Opposition Agent, Savine's Reclamation, Ledger Shredder, Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, and Archivist of Ogma. In all, damage being declared is 2 at J-Rock, 18 at Levi, and 7 in the air at Raij. In response, Raij activates Scoos, targeting Eli's Opposition Agent. It's exiled, Raij gains a life and puts a counter on Scoos. He does this 2 more times, targeting both Eli's Ledger Shredder and his Archivist of Ogma. He gains 2 life, but then he realizes he cannot escape the inevitable. No blocks are declared, damage is assigned, and Raij loses the game. Eli gains a total of 8 life through Tymna. In his second main phase, he loses 3 and draws 3 through Tymna's ability. He casts an Entomb. He fetches up Razakath, the Foul-Blooded, into his graveyard. He activates Soul Cauldron, exiling Razakath and placing a 1/1 counter on Orcish Bowmaster, which now has all the activated abilities of Razakath through Soul Cauldron. He activates the ability, losing 2 life and sacrificing his bird token as part of the cost. He plays an Otawara Soaring City as land for turn. He taps his Scalding Tarn, pays a life, and sacks it to fetch up a Tundra onto the battlefield. He casts Thassa's Oracle. She ETBs, and in response to the trigger, Eli casts a Demonic Consultation, naming Form of the Approach of the Second Sun. Eli exiles his entire library, Thassa's ETB triggers, and Eli wins the game. We had a blast playing and we're happy to show off what a newer commander is capable of. Xolatoyac showed some great synergy in using permanents with counters, while also staxing out the opponents. But in the end, Eli's card advantage through Tymna, in the 99, was exactly what he needed to find all the right pieces to put together a very non-traditional line to what is a classical Thoracle win. Let us know in the comments what you liked or what would like to see different. If you did enjoy the video, please like, subscribe, and share with friends, and we will see you back on the stack.